Hi, my name is Mick Rankin, and this is Conservative Chat. I will bring the issues of the day and give them a good common sense discussion. I believe we get emotional on a lot of issues, and if we look at the whole picture, we can digest the various points, find where truth overcomes emotion, and bring some sanity to our discussions. Please feel free to comment. I will read all of them. I won't respond to personal attacks, but I'll try to reply to every real concern, sometimes individually, sometimes as a group, or on the next podcast. We may not agree, but at least we can agree to disagree. In today's podcast, I will discuss how we talk about freedom, where it comes from, and what it means. Now, freedom is a concept many people talk about, but don't really know what is freedom. They don't know where it comes from, who determines their freedom, or decide how to express our freedom. The U.S. Constitution guarantees our rights and freedom. However, it's important to note that it does not grant those rights and freedoms. To understand the concept of freedom, it is important to understand where the concept came from. Throughout history, leaders have been worshipped as deities, and their reign decided by divine providence. Pharaohs of Egypt, Caesars of Rome, gods of Greece are examples of such leaders. The societies they ruled were required to pay homage to them and treat them as if they were a god. Now, the Jewish leaders and kings of Old Testament in the Bible were different. And they did not proclaim themselves worthy of worship. Only God was to be worshiped. The story of Jesus is another example of such a position. He was sent to save the world from sin, and he always denied himself but praised God. The Apostle Paul, while in a Roman prison, wrote to the Philippians in chapter 4 that he knew how to be content in whatever situation. That contentment was his freedom from outside influence. And that is the freedom I am discussing. Hope and freedom go hand in hand. Faith gives us hope of something better. Freedom comes from knowing there is something better. Freedom cannot be given. It must be within our own faith, and the stronger the faith, the greater the freedom. Now, since the time of Jesus, there has been a split into three major religions that all believed in the single God. Jews, Christians, and Muslims all believed that God of Abraham was the only true God. But even within these three groups, there were factions that resisted required obedience to the religious leadership. These groups often splintered into extremist factions, from the most conservative to the most liberal. Now, in Christianity, the Roman Catholic Church became the dominant theocracy that ruled the religious landscape. But that was challenged by the monarchies throughout Europe, who sought to establish themselves as the head of the church. Eventually, even the monarchies were challenged from within their kingdoms. This was especially true when the Bible was translated from Latin, making it readable for the masses. Now, the Protestant Reformation was an important part of this era because it was an awakening that the political and religious leadership did not decide how God was to be worshiped. When the New World was opened up, many of the various religious groups sought to leave Europe so they could practice their belief in God in their own manner. The fledgling colonies of America banded together and broke away from England. In their Declaration of Independence, it stated that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by their Creator acknowledged that rights are bestowed by God, not the government. And it placed God above government. The Constitution, written a few years later, was written to specify the limits of government, and within the Bill of Rights to specify those freedoms and rights that were bestowed by God. The Bill of Rights was written such that rights were guaranteed but not controlled by the government. That is an important distinction from where freedom is derived. If there is a higher power, then rights and freedoms cannot be controlled by the government. If the government is the sole authority, then it can take away those rights and freedoms. Our faith gives us the freedom of thought and the understanding that we owe obedience to God. It is the moral integrity that rules our lives, and God's law supersedes man's law. So here's my take. Freedom is a concept of moral thought where God's law is supreme. Man's law is derived from God's law. Freedom does not mean we can do anything we want to do. We must follow God's law. And we must obey the leadership of man inasmuch as they follow God's law. To be truly free, there must be faith in God, There is no compromise in thought and deed. Follow God's law. Do not worship others or objects or money or anything man-made. There is no control of our thought. Most importantly, freedom is not given. Freedom is derived from our faith. That is all for this podcast. Let me know what you think. If you like it, please subscribe so you get the latest podcast as I post it. Please share with your friends and family and ask them to subscribe too. This is Mick Rankin, signing off.